welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. I'm here with Jay Veniard, the owner of Ventech Search, a recruiting and growth specialist. He's a recruiting and growth specialist, and they're focused exclusively on industrial automation and manufacturing recruiting. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey Greg, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I've been looking forward to you being on this show. I've been trying to get you for a long time. I'm glad our schedules finally lined up and we could get you on here. Um, we've been talking. We were talking before the podcast here about the recruiting firm and some of the challenges that Jay is facing in the recruiting industry at large. So, really excited to dive into some of this. But Jay, before we get into some of the challenges that automation companies are facing, let's give our audience a little background. Tell us about your personal journey and Ventech Search and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so I kind of got into recruiting by accident, just like most recruiters. I mean, there's not anyone that ever goes to college and says I want to be a professional recruiter. I was actually a baseball player. I went to college, University of Central Florida, on a baseball scholarship. Spent 8 years playing minor league baseball. Originally drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays, then bounced around to the New York Mets, Tampa Bay.
Um,
Just to date me, they were called the Devil Rays back then. They're now the Tampa Bay Rays, and then spent a little bit of time bouncing around the independent leagues, trying to get back into it and live the dream. So, that's, where everything started when I retired from baseball due to a shoulder injury. I was a pitcher. I didn't know what to do. I had never really had a real job in my entire life. I had never interviewed for a job in my entire life. And so all I knew was, well, I'm kind of behind. I'm already 27. I got to do something to make good money. And naturally I said, well, sales sounds like a good idea. My sister-in-law was a pharmaceutical sales rep. She made good money. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And it's kind of a funny story. I'll try to be really brief, but
sure.
my first two interviews, oh man, they were horrible. They were terrible. And I think back sometimes to people, candidates, when I talk to them on the phone and they just interview really bad. And I always feel really terrible for them because I know what that feels like. And
Hmm.
then my third interview, I just a recruiting firm reached out to me, and basically this was back in 2004. In 2004, it said make $100,000 by your second year, and I was like, that sounds kind of fishy. I'm not sure I believe that. And so I went and interviewed, and I got the job on the spot. So I was like, oh man, I am a really good interviewer. I went from being a terrible interviewer to really good. Well, like me and you were talking about before the show started, what I didn't realize back in 2004, if you had a heartbeat and could kind of breathe, you got the job. And so I was like, all right, cool. So I got into the job. And, because of my competitive nature, back in those days, there was no training and recruiting. They said, here's a script, go make 100 phone calls.
Yeah.
And I'm a systems guy, I'm a coachable guy. You tell me what to do and I'll go do it. And I did it. And so my first 2 years, I killed it. Rookie of the year and then top biller. And then, of course, the ex-professional athlete ego came into play, and I was like, why am I giving away more than half of my commissions? I'm going to go start my own company. And so in 2007, I started my first recruiting firm, and it
Great
was called it.
timing. Great
Yeah.
timing, right? Great recession and
Well, wait until you hear the rest. It'll
okay.
even be better. So I naturally called it MVP Search Group because it was the athlete, and the niche that I decided to go after, residential construction. So not only was it the financial crisis coming, but I was right in the middle of
Housing.
the housing crash. But what's crazy is when I first got in, there was the housing market was actually hot when I first got in, and we
Sure.
killed it for the first 8 months, and
Yeah.
then after that, it fell off a cliff. It's the only time in my recruiting career that I ever got laughed at on the phone when I would call trying to get business. They were like, Jay, do you have any idea what's going on in the market? And I was like, well, yeah, I do, but I also think that, if there's someone who hasn't been laid off, which 90% of the industry have been laid off, um, I'll go get them for you because they have to be good if they hadn't been laid off. And so I pivoted, um, and I pivoted late. I tried to go back into my original niche, which was plastic injection molding, and I was
Huh.
already I was already too far behind. I had already lost too much money, and I went out of business in 2009. Now that I look back, it's the best thing that could have ever happened, because I
Why?
learned. I number one, I learned financial responsibility because back then, again, you got to remember, I was 27. I was making a lot of money. I was coming down off of being disappointed that I wasn't going to make professional athlete money, and I was spending everything I was making. And so I realized that that was the number one thing after that moving forward. I had to be more responsible with my money, and not only for me personally, but also for the health of the company. And so that was the big learning lesson too. And then, you know, even though as an ex-athlete I have a never give up attitude, that was a big challenge because I was like, I'm done with this. I'm just going to give up, and I still kept going. After I kind of went through that, and then actually made a full pivot out of recruiting for a short period of time, I started a couple of other businesses in digital marketing. My wife and I started a food tour business that has been in business now for 14 years.
Oh,
And
cool.
we've done a couple of other things. I also tried my hand at corporate talent acquisition. I was the head of talent acquisition for a mobile app company. Good job, great company, great industry, boring as hell. And the reason why it was boring for me is because what I realized when I was doing that is, and I don't want to minimize anyone that's in internal talent acquisition, but it's an easy job. You don't have to go out and hunt for the business. And
Mm.
I realized that that was the part that I liked about being an agency recruiter the most, is going out and hunting for the business and working that deal from new business all the way through to completion. That's what really kind of got me amped up. So when I was the head of talent acquisition, I was like, this job is really easy. It's boring. I'm working these jobs with, my own company. There's rules on how I'm allowed to recruit. Like, we weren't able to go in and actively headhunt out of companies, and still to this day, a lot of other companies, they tell their internal talent acquisition teams, don't go out and actively headhunt someone out of a company. Just post jobs, wait for someone good to come in. Here's your LinkedIn recruiter license. Go ahead and send a bunch of emails. And especially in today's day and age, that is the least effective
Hmm.
thing that you can do from a recruiting process. And so I got done doing that. Um, I was only there for 6 months. I decided this isn't for me. Went back to work for my old recruiting company, where I started my career. They were still recruiting as if it was 2004. And I was like, guys, there's so much we can be doing with digital marketing and all that. They're like, nope, just go make 100 cold calls. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, you guys are still dinosaurs. And so my wife was like, you got to start your own company. I was like, I don't want to start my own company. She's like, you got to start your own company. I'm like, I do not want the headache of starting my own company. Then she looked at me and she was like, you are going to start your own damn company. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. I was like, why are you so dead set on this? She's like, Jay, you're unemployable. She's like, you can't work for anyone.
Wow.
She's like, you've got too many opinions. You are too type A. You're too competitive. She's like, your competitiveness comes off as aggressiveness, and she's like, I've been with you long enough now to know that you turn a lot of people off because your aggressiveness comes through as being
Arrogant.
like arrogant, that I'm yelling at people sometimes, I'm
Uh,
arguing with people. And I'm like, why don't people understand that this is like my passion? Like, I know,
mm,
like, from a talent acquisition side, I know what a company needs. Like, I know what they need. And when they don't see the light or they won't let us do what we want to do, like, I get so passionate about it. I'm like, this is why we need to do it. This is why we should do it. And a
mhm.
lot of people are like, don't tell me what to do because I know better. And I'm like, well, you, from a talent acquisition perspective, you really don't. But
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from. So that's been the evolution of how I started Ventech. That was back in September of 2017. We
Okay.
came in, to industrial automation again by chance. My cousin was a general manager for a pharmaceutical filling manufacturing facility, and he was visiting, and I was kind of in my transit. What am I going to do? What industry? And I said, hey, you work in manufacturing. What are like the hardest jobs for you to fill? And so back in 2017, he was like controls engineers. I was like, I don't know what a controls engineer is. And he explained it to me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was like, now I understand it. Because, when I was recruiting in plastic injection molding, the main position that I was placing was a process engineer. So I understood manufacturing, I understood the manufacturing process. So as soon as he told me what a controls engineer did, I was like, oh, got it. Perfect. So they're hard to fill. He was like, yeah, he was like, I can't find them. And when I do find them, they end up with five offers and I get some and I lose some. I was like, okay, what's like the average salary of a controls engineer? And I think back then he said it was like between like 120 and 160. And I was like, I'm going to recruit controls engineers. And so that's how it started. Like, when we first started Ventech, we were an engineering focused industrial automation recruiting firm that lasted until COVID hit. When COVID hit, all of the no one was hiring engineers because the engineers weren't allowed to go to the facilities. And so what ended up happening is in 2020, literally, I still have it ingrained in my mind. It was March 13th, 2020. I think like at least seven of my clients called, said everything's on hold. I was like, oh shit. And so, sorry if I'm not supposed to
No, you're
cuss, but
good.
um, I was like, oh boy. And so we as a company went from March of 2020 to November of 2020 without making one placement or having one search. So
Ooh.
I didn't know what to do. But again, I I live by the mantra of you don't ever give up.
Yeah.
My college baseball coach gave us this printout piece of paper, and it's the bird. It's a crane, and the crane's trying to eat the frog, and the frog's got the crane by its throat, and it says don't ever give up. And so I always think about that. And what happened in October or November of 2020 is somebody from Vecna Robotics reached out to us, said, hey, um, we need a couple of salespeople. And I was like, okay, cool. We had never done a lot of sales roles. We were doing here and there. So we took on that search. We were able to complete that and fill that very quickly. And then they had needed another one and then another one. And I was like, then some other companies were like reaching out to us, hey, do you do sales? And I was like, what is going on here? And that was the pivot because I looked at it and I said, holy crap, what's happening is all of these companies, when our supply chain pretty much went down during COVID, all
Mhm.
of these companies, manufacturers, logistics companies, they got caught with their pants down because they weren't automated. And so what I believe happened, and I think a lot of people will agree with me, is that all of these companies said, holy crap, we got caught with our pants down. We used to think automation was a nice to have, but it was expensive. Now it's a must have, and it doesn't matter how much it costs. We have to have it. And now, as we all know, automation is in almost every manufacturing facility, every distribution and logistics, center. So we are now 80% sales focused. So everything from an individual contributor to a CRO, and now we're about 20% engineering focused, and most of
Wow.
our engineering searches are for current clients, and we only stay in a still a very, very narrow niche with engineers. So we'll do an applications engineer, controls engineer, mechanical design engineer, automation engineer, and a robotics engineer. Anything outside of that, um, if someone's got a quote unquote field service engineer, a lot of times that's similar to what a lot of people like for an applications engineer. We'll take that search, but we stay very, very niched on the engineering side, and we'll usually only do an engineering search for a current client that's on the sales side.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, thanks for that background.
Yeah.
Let's get into the recruiting business itself and what you're seeing. You've talked a lot about how a lot of these automation companies are falling short and what needs to change for them to get that top sales and engineering talent. Tell me what the big problem is out there right now, Jay.
Yeah, so the big problem is they don't want to pay recruiting fees. And I get it. I mean, right now to get a top salesperson or to get a top engineer, you're looking at about a $30,000 or more fee. I mean, it just is what it is. And if you want top talent, you have to pay top dollar on the salary end for that person, which means, because we as a company, as a recruiter, get paid on a commission basis, you're paying a commission on that salary. So when the salaries are higher, the fees are higher. And most companies, and I get it, it's a good business decision. If you can fill the position on your own, you don't need us. But the challenge is in a highly technical field like industrial automation, and especially when you're dealing with salespeople, the top salespeople always have a robust pipeline. They have commissions that are pending, they have commissions that are coming. And for them to leave and go to a new company, a lot of times they're leaving money on the table. And so if a company is what I call posting and praying, they post their job online, they do an ad in Indeed, LinkedIn, all the other ones, you're not getting that top tier talent because they're not looking at your job ads, they're not visiting your website. So you have zero chance of getting that type of talent. And the reason why we're able to get that type of talent is because what we do is, and when I say we, it's me and Sully, and a lot of people in the industry, they know who Sully is.
Yeah.
We go out there and form relationships with the people who we either know or are told are the best of the best. And we go in and we get to know them. We get to know what is the next step in your career. What is your career going to look like in 5 years? Are you ready to make a move? Like I always ask people today, the next step in your career looks like this. If I find that tomorrow, are you ready to make that move? And if it's next step in their career, the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
But because a lot of recruiters are transactional, they will only go after people when they have an exact open job ready. And when you do that, you're just a transactional recruiter. The other thing that it does for us too is it allows us to fill positions much quicker. I mean, just this year, I'm sorry, in 2025, we filled a CRO role in one day. Now, when I say one day, we had the candidate on day one, and then with the interview process, it took a little bit longer, but we found a CRO and placed a CRO in one day. And then toward the end of the year, Sully made a regional sales executive placement in 48 hours. Now, what does that mean? That means that our clients, and this is another tip for any company that uses an executive recruiting firm, whether it's us or any of our competitors or whatever, you have to move extremely fast on top talent, because what happens is a lot of times the passive candidates, they're not looking, but as soon as they kind of get that taste for an interview that maybe we put them in, they start thinking, I wonder if there's other things out there. So they kind of start looking on their own. They start getting curious, and if
Mm,
you don't move fast, you're going to lose them. But not more so because of that. It's more so because as soon as you start the interview process with top tier candidate, you're being interviewed more than you're interviewing them, because you have to think about it. You need them more than they need you. So you need to keep your A game up. And I tell people this all the time, and it's one of the core principles of what we do here at Ventech is you have to keep the candidate experience at an A plus level no matter what. So even when we're declining candidates, we never ghost a candidate. We call them and say, hey, look, they ended up going a different direction. If we've got useful feedback for that candidate, maybe they didn't interview that well, and we have a tidbit on what part of the interview, we'll be like, hey, look, this is kind of why they passed, so we want to help that candidate do better. So I think that's one of the big things that a lot of companies miss is they don't they don't want to pay the fee, but when they really kind of look at it, they're saying, well, this is a cost to us. Well, no, a recruiting fee is actually an investment.
yeah.
You may pay us $30,000, but we're going to bring you a salesperson that's going to make you 5 or 10x that $30,000 fee over the course of their first 12 to 18 months is usually what we see.
Jay, talk to me a little bit. You had a great post today about an internal team. And I'm sure a lot of these people are like, oh, because we get this a lot as a marketing agency. Oh, we've got internal people. But you made a point about, well, yeah, you might have an internal team maybe running your strategy, but you need a specialist. You need
Yeah.
somebody who is really focused and is out there networking and doing something very specific and very niche. Talk to me about how you potentially or how you do work with internal teams and how
Yeah.
you can, meet the needs of that CEO is like, no, I already got somebody hired, Jay.
Yeah. That's actually a really good question, and it's a hot button issue whenever a third party recruiter comes in and starts talking about internal talent acquisition. And as an ex head of talent acquisition, like I got to see it on the inside. Like I know what goes on, and at the end of the day, my belief is this: is that if you don't have a third part, whether you have internal talent acquisition or not, if you do not have a third party headhunter who is a niche specialist in your industry working on the critical searches in concert with your internal acquisition team, you are not serious about finding top talent, because what you're ending up doing is, and I don't know if this stat is still valid, but I know it's going to be close. LinkedIn had something, I don't know how long ago, and they said, at any given time, only 18% of the market is quote unquote active.
Okay.
So if that's the case, when you post your jobs, you can only expect to see 18% of the market. Then you look at, I think their number was something around 15 to 17% of the market are coming close to or will retire with their current company. So they're not going to move. So then you're roughly around 30% of the market right there, is kind of like, you've got the 18% that's active. You've got let's just call it 15% that is going to retire. So how do you get that middle part? So roughly the middle 80%, how do you get them? Well, if they're not looking for jobs and they're not searching job boards, and they're definitely not responding to your in-mails because they don't know who you are, you've never interacted with them before, internal recruiters never post content, so they don't know anything about the company. How do you get them? You get them by using a niche specialized headhunter like ourselves or a couple of the other firms out there who specialize in the industry as well. And the companies who do have the internal talent acquisition teams that we work with, because we do have a couple of clients where we work directly with their internal talent acquisition. The key differentiator is that internal talent acquisition person understands that we are not competing with them. We are their ally and their resource. We're on their team. Um, that internal talent acquisition person gives us direct access to the hiring manager. They don't try to gatekeep, because a lot of times an internal talent acquisition person will say, well, if I can't find the person and I give them direct access to the hiring manager, it's going to make me look bad.
Right.
Um, if that's the mentality of your company, probably doing something wrong, because you're wanting that team effort. And the last thing that I'll say about that is the companies that we are working with their internal talent acquisition team that give us access and move quick, they're actually our best clients. They're the ones that give us the most searches. They're the ones that we move through the process very quickly because they get it. So, that all stems from a top down approach. If it's a head of talent acquisition, that head of talent acquisition has to say, hey, look, you're not going to be punished if an agency recruiter fills this position, because we understand there's a difference in what the specialty is. At the end of the day, Greg, internal talent acquisition is designed to find more of the rank and file type of jobs, and the ones that they fill on a regular basis, and the ones that can be filled quickly with job ads and minimal LinkedIn work. For the more critical things, especially on the sales side and the very specialized engineering searches, if you don't have a third party recruiter working on it, you're never going to find top talent, and you will always get to see talent where you're like, God, this isn't really the right person. And that's the reason why.
Yeah, and one of my early roles, I worked with a company, and entirely sales driven company, and we had the two ringers who just, it's a team of about 10 salespeople, the two ringers who just kick butt, and then the other eight guys were just like meh. And
Yeah.
there'd always be this like constant turnover of more meh coming in
Yeah.
and leaving. And I know what you're talking about, and those two guys were untouchable, really. I thought, I mean, because this is my question to you: how do you get those guys? Because they're running their own thing. they
Yeah.
they they are they make their future. And how do you bring in somebody like that who sounds a lot like they probably have that kind of personality where they're driving the train.
Yeah. The best recruiters are a strong mix of art and science and a ton of grit and determination. And so, what that does too is it allows us to figure it out. So, think about this: you're in internal talent acquisition. When you post your job on LinkedIn, it's a job description. Job descriptions are boring.
Yeah.
The other problem with job descriptions, at least that I'm seeing, is the younger generation. When you've got 20 things, 20 bullet points of what you're looking for on that job description, the younger generation, if they see those last two out of 20 that they don't have, they tell themselves they're not qualified and they will not apply to your job.
Wow.
So you're missing out on it. And so what we do is we rewrite all of our, for our marketing purposes, when we go to market, we rewrite all of our clients job descriptions. We stay within the bounds of what they need to do, but what we focus on when we're marketing is we create the sizzle and the story about the company. Because remember, we're we're not placing active candidates. Since 2020, the number is 99. The number is two candidates, so it's about 99% of the people we've placed since 2020. We've pulled out of jobs and put them into new ones. And the reason we're able to do that is because we know that storytelling and sizzle, especially with salespeople, that's what sells it. Because you have to think, what is it? Okay, great. the money's there. The top salesperson knows no matter where they go, the money's going to be there unless the commission structure sucks. So what is it about the company that's going to get them to go? We dig in. We try to tell a story about the leader, where they came from, what makes them happy, what makes the company exciting, where are they going, how are they growing, what's forced that growth, you know I tell everyone here in our organization, when you are either putting out a marketing piece or you're pitching a candidate on a job, you have to paint the picture of what life is going to look like in that company. You don't even need to tell them that they must have X years of experience and sell X type of products. Like, none of that stuff really matters, because we're 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 in the industry every day. So we already know what a controls engineer does. We know what a salesperson does. We know what a sales engineer does. We know what everyone does. We don't even need to look at a job description, because they're all very similar. What we got to do is we got to go out and find the best person for the job and convince them to do it. And we do that with storytelling. So I think that's the one main thing that we do different. Then on top of that is we're marketing to people 24/7. Internal talent acquisition, they'll usually do maybe one or two in-mails to a potential target. For any leader listen to this, you have to think about it this way. If you're a candidate and someone who works for the company that's trying to recruit and hire them reaches out and says the company's great, do you think your internal recruiter is going to tell you the pros and the cons of the company? No. But guess who will? We will, because we know the pros and the cons. We ask companies that because we don't want any surprises. And so then what we do when we take it to market is we have a very robust marketing plan. We design a 6-step email sequence that goes out many times. I'm not going to say how many because I don't want to give away one of our secret sauces. 6 email sequence that goes out many times over the course of 12 days. And in between that, they're getting calls, LinkedIn messages, text messages from our recruiters more times than not, because Sully and I have been in the industry for so long, and because we go to all of the trade shows, all of the events, a lot of people know who we are. We usually know right away the top 2 or 3 people who would be a fit for that particular position. And of course, we continue doing all of our active recruiting too. And I think that's just the main difference is we are going out to the market with mass force, call it, I'll speak in your terms, guerrilla marketing,
Yeah.
when internal teams, they don't do that. They just post a job, they post and then pray that someone comes in and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So my suggestion or my recommendation for any company, I understand recruiting fees are expensive, but it's an investment, and you are going to get a higher quality candidate usually on a critical search than you would if you just have someone someone working on it internally. Case in point, it just happened 2 weeks ago. I won't name the company. We went out, our research team found candidates that matched the job. We started reaching out. We got a positive response from a candidate. I interviewed him, loved him, said you're a perfect fit, sent him into the company. We get an immediate response from the talent acquisition team. I've already identified this person. They just haven't responded to my in-mail. And that doesn't count. That's still that's the reason why you hire us.
Yeah.
People respond to us. And so I love this company because they're like, hey, Jay, Ventech Search, they get credit for this, no big deal. And so we move forward. And so, but again, that was the collaboration with the internal recruiting team, just basically saying, hey, I understand that you identified them and that they were in your LinkedIn Sales Navigator or LinkedIn Recruiter project, and you sent an email, but they didn't respond.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from that internal talent acquisition person, but I saw that he screenshotted the message that he sent to the candidate. It was cookie cutter.
Yeah.
It sounded just like any other internal recruiter. It sounded like someone who had just started in the recruiting industry, and quite frankly, that's the reason why the guy responded to us and not them is because our marketing engages people. It gets them excited. They know what they're going to expect when they go work at that company.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you guys are recruiting the kind of people that you are. And so you know how to reach them, you can relate to them more, you know what moves them. So Jay, we're at the top of the hour here. This is a quick show, but man, you really generated some gems for us here. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, talk about recruiting automation talent. I know you also launched your own coaching service as well. How do they reach you?
Yeah, I would say shoot me. I'm on LinkedIn all day long. Shoot me a DM, connect with me on LinkedIn. Even if you're a company who doesn't have the budget to hire an agency recruiting firm, I'd be happy to give you advice on how to make your internal processes more efficient. And then, real quick, and I'll stop. One little plug for something new we're doing. We have an AI talent product. AI and automation. Basically, what we do is we eliminate the whole front end of the recruiting process for companies. So that's the research, the sourcing, and the messaging. So we would be doing the messaging for you, the messaging that people actually respond to. It's all on autopilot, and it's really designed for the positions that are more rank and file that you're going to be hiring all the time. It can work on some one-off critical roles, but it's more effective for the ones where you just want to build a big pipeline of candidates. Clients get those names, and then from there their internal team will go after the warm leads, and also if they want to reach out to the cold leads, they can do that as well.
And if you got just a second, I just want to
Yeah.
dive into that a little bit deeper because I don't like rolling out stuff about AI without addressing then what does that mean for your actual people who are still working with the company? What are you are you reducing roles? Are you changing roles? Are you helping them do things, concentrate in different areas?
That's an interesting question. It could be all of the above. I
Okay.
mean, companies that have very large internal talent acquisition teams, unfortunately, yes, it will replace some of those jobs. I believe that right now, from what I'm seeing, AI is going to take over 80%, and it's that front 80% of the recruiting function, all the way up into the conversations that actually influence people to make a decision to make a job change. So everything up to that, AI is going to take over, and it can be automated. That's what we're providing for our clients. Companies are still going to need us for the critical searches, but that's yes, it's going to take jobs, but it will enhance the efficiency of the internal teams where there's just one or two people who are tasked with 60 different jobs.
Mhm.
um, you can't work that many jobs. That's the other thing. And
Yeah.
so what we do is we'll come in and we'll do all of the front end work by researching the type of candidate you need. We'll dial it in. To be quite honest with you, this is going to sound very egotistical. We know more about what you need in the particular title than you do. When we talk to a lot of our clients, I just want to know about the intangibles and why someone should work there. Once we have that information, our research team goes and builds the list of people. Then we automate it with our messaging. We put together one of those 5-step email processes, and it goes out to those candidates. As soon as those candidates come in, that internal talent acquisition team, instead of spending all of their time and all of that admin work on screening and looking at that, they're going to get a list back with candidates with a ranked and the ones that respond. And then now the internal talent team can go to those people first, and also to still have the rest of the pipeline and be able to go out and reach out to those people in a little bit more of a cold fashion. So what we're doing on that end is basically eliminating a lot of the admin and sourcing work that some of the internal teams do that take up a ton of time.
Yeah. Now I mean whenever we're applying AI, same thing. It's like it it totally eliminates the grunt work and the things like that
Yeah.
that's just driving you crazy. And like yesterday I just wrote like what I thought was an incredible web page with so much content and so much great information. And I didn't spend all this time, mulling over just some of the minutia. So
Yeah.
sounds like a great program. Jay, hold on for a second after we end the stream here, but thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and a lot of great insights that you shared with us today.
It was awesome. I appreciate it. I hope some people got some good insight from us.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining us on Thought Leaders Live. We'll catch you on the next show.